Chapter 12. Sir Huntley's Reservations. Once Jack and I were back from our honeymoon in Venice and settled into our new home, I decided the first thing we should do was settle the question of signing my inheritance over to Mama. She had been so sweet during our entire trip, writing me letters telling me she couldn't wait for me to come home, telling me how happy she was to have such a successful and wonderful daughter. Miss Prickett, who came along on our trip as my lady's maid, kept her comments to herself. I could see she didn't trust Mama, and it was quite clear Jack didn't either. But I wanted to do this for her, and he was happy to go along with anything that would make me happy. What was it going to hurt giving her what, frankly, my mother should have left to her in the first place? The day after we arrived home, we asked Sir Huntley to come over to discuss the details. Mama was out having tea with Lady Slapton and would be coming over later for dinner, so we could all sign the paperwork. It would be the first time I would have anyone in my new home, and I was brimming with excitement. Miss Prickett was taking care of organizing our new household staff and managed to get in quick introductions and amid the preparations. So quick was my introduction that I couldn't remember anyone's name. I would have to rely on Miss Prickett to remind me later. I had more important matters to deal with. I knew Miss Prickett would make sure everything for the dinner with Mama would go beautifully. But first was the matter of Sir Huntley. Jack and I sat in the study of our stately new home while waiting for Sir Huntley to arrive. Do you want me here when you talk to Sir Huntley, my dear, or shall I leave you two alone? Oh, I want you here, my crackerjack, I said with a kiss. Well, this is your matter, my darling. I know you've quite made up your mind. I'll simply be here for moral support. Not that you'll need me, he said, looking even more dashing than Humphrey Bogart. And before we knew it, Miss Prickett came into the room. Lord and Lady DeVil, Sir Huntley is here. She wore a disapproving look on her face. Miss Prickett didn't say outright that she disagreed with my plan, but she took no pains to hide how she felt. I found myself putting up with Miss Prickett's little comments and looks after Anita and I parted ways. I missed having an in-between who I considered a friend and companion, and Jack said it did me good to have a servant who could be frank with me from time to time. He said it kept me on my toes, whatever that meant. So I put up with her. After all, she made me feel like I was but bringing a bit of my childhood home with me to my new home with Jack. Thank you, Miss Prickett, I said. Please show him in. I could see Sir Huntley's eyes widen as he entered the room. He was impressed with my new home. I should have met him in the grand vestibule to see his eyes pop out of his head. My new vestibule could have fit the entire main floor of Mama's place on Belgrave Square. The floors were made entirely of marble, and the room was simply bursting with Roman statues. And the grand staircase, well, that was a marvel. I couldn't wait to show it all off to Mama later when she came for dinner. Hello, Sir Huntley. Welcome to my new home. Miss Prickett, can you have the maid please bring in our tea? The staff in my new home was enormous. There was no way I was going to remember all of their names, so I took to calling them by their job titles when talking to Miss Prickett and calling them dear when speaking to them directly. I left them remembering the names to Miss Prickett, who had taken on the role of head housekeeper. She directed the maid to bring in the tea, serving Sir Huntley first. He sipped his tea nervously as I shared my wishes for my father's money with him. Jack simply sat there beside me, flashing his wide Clark Gable smile, listening but not interjecting. Jack wasn't the sort of husband who felt he had to do the talking for his wife. He valued my mind, my sharp wit, and my sometimes wicked tongue. Lady DeVil, it is my duty as your solicitor to say this is very ill-advised. Your father wouldn't have wanted you to sign all of your money over to your mother. What does the money matter to me, Sir Huntley? I am very well taken care of by Jack. Why shouldn't Mama have the money? Papa should have left it to her in the first place. Your father wanted you to have something of your own. He wanted you to be your own person, to distinguish yourself. And so I have. And I've kept his name. What does it matter if I give Mama his money? He was very clear on that point, Lady DeVil. He asked me to avoid it at all costs. But why was he so dead set against Mama having the money? I've married a man with a fortune far greater than my own. It would be selfish to keep my father's money for myself when I can give it to my poor Mama. Your mother draws a very sizable income from your capital holdings, Corella. She is by no means poor. I'm sorry to have to say so, he said, trailing off as he tried to find the right words. Please, Sir Huntley, speak as candidly as you like. You won't offend us, I said. Thank you, Lady DeVil. I didn't want to bring this up, but your father was afraid that if the capital was left in her charge, she would squander it, leaving you with nothing when she passed. That's why he left it to you. I looked at my Jack, trying to read his face. I didn't want him thinking less of my Mama, but his face was passive. Sir Huntley looked as if he had more to say, but was trying very hard to arrive at the right words without offending me. But then he found his courage. Your mother's spending is frankly outrageous, even for a woman of her means. She refuses to take advice on the matter and has been working tirelessly to seize control over the trust since your father passed. I made a promise to your father, Lady DeVil, to protect you, and protect you I shall. Sir Huntley was by nature a nervous man, but I had never seen him so rattled. He was clearly very devoted to my father, and intended to do all he could to stay true to his word. But I wasn't going to listen to this sort of talk about my mother, not for one more moment. Working tirelessly to seize my money, ever since my father died? It didn't seem possible. I don't believe it. I won't have you telling such lies about my mother, sir. I assure you it's true, Lady DeVil. I have a note here written in your mother's hand stating her intentions to have you married to Lord Shortbottom. The poor man's hands were shaking. I wanted to put him out of his misery, but I think I sort of enjoyed seeing him so wound up. I'm sorry, I meant Lord DeVil, he said, looking at Jack. Please do call me Jack, Jack said, smiling over his cup of tea and trying to cut the tension in the room. Oh, my Jack, always trying to fix everything with a smile. Yes, I'm sorry, said the round-faced man, clearly ruffled. Please. He handed me the letter. Read it for yourself. It was just a folded piece of paper, a harmless thing, but it seemed ominous to me, deadly, and I didn't want to touch it. Darling Jack, will you read it? I asked. Yes, my dear, he said, taking the letter from the nervous solicitor. Shall I read it aloud? I couldn't believe I was so nervous that a small folded piece of paper could elicit such terror. No, just read it. We will discuss it later. I could see the color in my husband's face fade away as he read the letter, only for a moment, as if a deep, penetrating sadness washed over him. He composed himself quickly, put the letter in his breast pocket, and took my hand. My sweetest dear, he said, with the saddest look on his face. He didn't have to tell me Sir Huntley was right. He didn't have to tell me what the letter said. Everyone was right about my mother, my father, Sir Huntley, Miss Prickett, and quite possibly Anita. But it was no matter. Why shouldn't she be hurt by my father leaving all his money to me? Why shouldn't she want me to marry a rich man? Did that make her an evil person? I thought not. And I couldn't stand the look on Jack's face. I never wanted to see pity in his eyes when looking at me. Not ever again. It's no matter. I would still like her to have the money, I said. I had made up my mind. But Lady DeVil, even Sir Huntley's bulldog jowls seemed to jiggle in protest. You heard me, Sir Huntley. I have made up my mind. There is nothing you could say that will change it. We won't speak of this again. Jack and I never did speak of it again, and he never showed me the letter, just as I requested. I never again saw that look of pity on his face. I had seen that look all too often while I was growing up. I was surrounded by faces filled with pity when I was a girl. I wouldn't have it in my new home. I was starting a new life. I spent my days happily in our large country estate, and every so often I would travel back to London to see Mama. Life was good with Jack. We threw lavish parties, inviting all the young bright things. And we often traveled to America to see Jack's holdings there. Jack and I did all the things I ever dreamed of growing up. We visited all the exotic places I fancied. All I had to do was make my wishes known, and Jack made all the arrangements. He was the best traveling companion, always up for adventure, always charming the locals. There was nothing he wouldn't try, from riding unruly camels when we went to Egypt to exploring the ruins of Angkor Wat, from lazily gliding in a gondola in Venice to living our best lives in a luxury apartment in Manhattan. The world was ours. It was the life I always imagined for myself. And when we made our way home, we had the grandest parties. But nothing topped my 25th birthday party. Of course, Jack had thrown me the most extravagant party. It really was the biggest event of the season. I think the only party bigger was our wedding day. How can you outdo a wedding at Westminster Abbey? Jack went all out. There were ice sculptures of me modeled after various important women of history, chocolate fountains, trays upon trays of caviar and toast points, bands in every wing of the house, and the ballroom was simply packed with the who's who of London society. Plus, there was a smattering of Hollywoods thrown in for good measure, to keep things interesting. It was a night to remember. It was far from an intimate affair, so Mama decided she wouldn't attend. Instead, she sent me a marvelous gift, a fur coat, her signature gift. I was living the grandest life I could wish for. I was married to the love of my life. My mother was safely tucked away in my childhood home. I was rich, beautiful, and happy. I was Lady Cruella DeVil. But of course, isn't it always the case that the higher you fly, the farther you fall? And I would indeed fall, farther than I could have possibly imagined.